Good evening. I'm Stephen Riley, director of the Speed Museum. And because I'm still working at home, like most of my colleagues, I could not be more excited tonight to actually be in the Speed Museum for our second virtual after hours. Thank you for joining us for this new event as we experiment how to deliver an engaging, art-making, music-filled, drink-filled, art-filled experience at the Speed Museum while you're still at home. So thank you for joining us. I realize that I grew up in the golden age of variety shows. And so I'm really excited to be actually getting to lead my own kind of variety show now. I grew up in the era of the Carol Burnett Show, the Flip Wilson Show, the Sonny and Cher Show, the Muppet Show. And now we get to put all of that together and bring it to you at the Speed. I hope that some or many of you have been back to the reopened Speed since early July because things are going really well here. As we told you before, we start from a period of a position of great safety, an enormous amount of square footage, UV filtration on all our air handling units, time ticketing and touch-free visits. And we have added to that with a generous sponsorship from Baird that allowed us to buy plexiglass shields and signage and stickers and hand sanitizing equipment. We have added to that experience. And we are now welcoming people Friday and Saturday and Sunday of every week who are buying their tickets online, wearing their masks as we are when I'm not speaking at a microphone alone in a gallery, and coming in on half-hour increments to experience everything we have to offer. The biggest of those things is Andy Warhol Revelation, a monumental exhibit that celebrates that iconic artist's work, the largest exhibit ever devoted to Andy Warhol in our region's history. And then one that tells it through a very particular Louisville-related theme through his own lifelong Catholicism. People have been deeply moved by this exhibit. But today, we are here to celebrate the fact that we are opening the next series of exhibits at the reopened Speed. Under the shared title, Shaker Commonwealth, two of our curators are presenting remarkable achievements. You're going to hear from Scott Urbis, our curator of decorative arts and design tonight, about his exhibit, Careful, Neat, and Decent: The Arts of the Kentucky Shakers, an extraordinary deep dive into the design culture, the design way of thinking of the people who inhabit South Union Shaker Village and Shaker Village at Pleasant Hill, what we often call Shaker Town. The second part of that exhibit is a video installation by a pair of artists, Mariam Ghani and Erin Ellen Kelly, a deep exploration of the sense of place at Shaker Town or Pleasant Hill in partnership with the Louisville Ballet and the Moving Collective of Dancers, a really interesting exploration of that space. And I want to thank our critical sponsors for those two exhibits, Careful, Neat, and Decent, and the video is called When the Spirits Moved Them, They Moved. Hard Scuffle Incorporated and Snowy Owl Foundation have provided the lead foundation and corporate support. I also want to thank Rose Cooper and Alan Bush, longtime neighbors and supporters of the Pleasant Hill, for their support, as well as Guthrie and Lisa Zering, who've been critical allies in us reaching out to the state. The Speed is the largest and oldest art museum in the state of Kentucky, and the Shaker Commonwealth pair of exhibits are the latest in our celebration and our deep exploration of all of those arts at the Speed, the state's art museum. I want to really also thank all of After Hours tonight is sponsored by our most generous corporate partner, Brown-Forman, and their Woodford Reserve brand. And you're going to hear about some very special Woodford Reserve related programming. But Woodford Reserve has brought us tonight's After Hours and brings us a lot more. So now, as the host of this variety show, I'm going to tell you what's up for the next hour of our 2-hour program. And I'll be back in about 55 minutes to tell you about the second hour. But it is really exciting. The first thing that's going to start right after this, our own Brittany Thurman, our studio programs manager, who's become a YouTube star with her art-making videos that have been helping parents and teachers who are dealing with non-traditional instruction in the time of the coronavirus, is going to be joining us for some woven jewelry making for 10 minutes, inspired by the weaving of the Shakers, something that Scott Urbis explores in his exhibit. After Brittany's performance and art-making opportunity for everybody of all ages, Scott Urbis himself is going to be joined in a conversation with Tommy Hines, the longtime devoted executive director of the South Union Shaker Village. If you haven't been to South Union near Bowling Green in southern Kentucky, you should get there. Tommy Hines has devoted decades to it, and he and Scott are going to have a great conversation about it. Next is going to be a Woodford Reserve interlude that you don't want to miss. Artist Richard Sullivan is going to show us how to paint bottles of Woodford Reserve as he painted Woodford Reserve's own Derby commemorative bottle. And so get your bottle of Woodford out and get your paint and get ready. And then if you have never met Chris Morris, Brown-Forman's and Woodford Reserve's master distiller, you want to join. Chris is going to be here with us to show how to make the Woodford Reserve, I've forgotten the name, of Spire, which was their special cocktail for the Kentucky Oaks. And so join them. Get here, Chris Morris. He's full of bourbon history and regalia and cocktail making. And I'll be back after that. Oh, and right after that, before I return, Jose Diaz, the unbelievable chief curator from the Andy Warhol Museum, who brought us Andy Warhol Revelation, is going to be here for a taped interlude, showing us and talking about Andy Warhol. So now it's time for Brittany Thurman to join. Stay with us, do some art making, make a cocktail, and stay with us for after hours. Thank you to Woodford Reserve, and thank you for joining us tonight.
My name is Brittany Thurman. I am the Studio Programs Manager at the Speed Art Museum. And for today's After Hours art activity, I'm excited to introduce to you the art of shaker weaving. And in particular, we're going to make an object that we can use every day, since the items that the shaker woman created were everyday items that they could use. Shaker woman created textiles from rugs to cheer tape to linens and dresses. Many of these materials and pieces have stood the test of time thanks to the hefty and intricate technique of weaving. I also feel that the art of weaving is very meditative. It's used to help with relaxation, and it's something that we definitely all need in 2020. Because Shaker Woman created items that were really for everyday use, I brainstormed what we could create in 2020 that we could also use every day. So I came up with the idea of jewelry that is weaved. You can either wear it daily or preserve it as art. And the type of jewelry we are going to create is a brooch, or you can make a keychain out of your weaved item. So the materials that you will need are a pen or pencil, a ruler, sewing needles. If you have young children at home, plastic blunt sewing needles are perfect. You will, of course, need yarn or string. And if you want some added detail, your yarn could be of different colors, different sizes, different textures. You need scissors, tape, and if you want to go with the brooch idea, you will need a pen backing or a pen setting. You can use material that you can put your weaved design into. So let's get started. The first thing that you're going to do is you will take a piece of cardboard and cut it so that it is 6 inches by 4 inches. And you want your cardboard to be kind of hefty so that when we weave, it doesn't move all over the place. And after you have cut your cardboard, you want to take your pen, and along the shortest side of your cardboard, you're going to mark 1/2 inch intervals. So you would mark those 1/2 inch intervals on one side, turn it over, mark the 1/2 inch intervals on the other side. So if you've done the 6 inch by 4 inch, you should have about 7 marks on each side of your piece of cardboard. The next step is to cut those marks. So you're just going to make slits along each side that you've created your marks. You want your slits to kind of be deep enough so that your string or your yarn doesn't slip out. And then, like I said, you should have about 7 slits that you have cut. The next step is to take a piece of yarn or string. You can double this yarn or string up so that it's thicker and stronger. And you want to wrap it around your cardboard. So basically you are creating your loom. So you're going to wrap it around each side, front and back, the entire piece of cardboard. And after you've wrapped it around the entire piece of cardboard, the next step is to tape the back where you have your 2 ends of your string. You're going to tape the back so that this loom doesn't fall apart. Okay, so now we're ready to get to the weaving part. So this is the fun part of the activity. So you're going to take your yarn and the color that you've selected. If you want it to be something simple for this keychain, I've just used purple for my loom, and for the weaving, I used green. So just 2 solid colors. You can mix it up and use several different colors. You can create a pattern. You can be very detailed if you want. So for this one, I have my pattern of yellow, green, white, or off-white, yellow, green. It's up to you. So to start our weave, we are going to start by going under, over, under, over, under, over, along the shortest end of our loom. So I'm taking my yarn, I'm going under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And now you're just going to do the same thing on the other side. So since I started off and this end piece is under, I'm just going to start this one over, under, over, under, over, under. And I'm going to repeat. And I'm going to do this for the entirety of my loom, unless I want to use a different color. It's also important that while you're creating your weave, that you bunch your yarn together so that it is tight, because we don't want this to be loose. So this is under, over, over. And do it one more time, and after this I think that I'm going to switch the color so I can add some variety. Okay, so how you switch your colors, I'm sure that there is a very professional way to do this, but this is how I've taught myself to do this. I'm just going to cut the yarn and I'm actually just going to tie the string together. And I will take my next color and start on the same side that I began with. So I'm going to start with the green, going under, pull it through, over, under. So basically I'm just doing the same exact thing with the green yarn that I did with the blue. I think I will do this about 2 more times. Okay, and one more time, going the opposite direction. And now I'm just going to cut this yarn like I did before. Tie it together. Bunch the pieces together so that the weft is tight. So the next step is to cut the yarn that we've just wrapped around the loom. So I'm going to cut this side first, and I want to cut 2 strands of yarn at a time, and I'm just going to tie these pieces together. This way, what we've weaved does not slip out. So since there are 3 pieces, what I've been doing is cutting all 3 of these end pieces and just doing the same thing, tying them together. And you want to do the same for the next side, but you first want to take off your tape. I'm just going to pull this yarn and tie it like I did for the other side. Okay, so we have weaved a very simple piece of art. So the next step is that you can either cut the long pieces of yarn that you've tied together so that it's just a little bit more neat than before. You can braid these ends together, or you can leave them as is. Maybe you want these to be like a tassel of some sort. And the next step is to take your pen and adhere it to the back of your design. So you can use needle and thread to sew this to the back of your piece of weaved jewelry, or you can use tape, you can use glue dots, you can use super glue, whatever you have on hand to make sure this pin does not come off of your brooch. And there you have it. If you have a pin setting, you can make this weave design thicker, and you can just place it into the setting of your pin. Rectangular or square pin settings are great if you have those on hand, because it'll just snap right into place. And you've created your very own piece of weaved jewelry. After you've created your piece of art, please share it with us at Art Sparks from Home. We would love to see what you've created and how you've put your own twist on this art idea. Thank you.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Urbis, curator of decorative arts and design at the Speed, though not at the Speed, but at home, like so many of us are these days. And I'm the curator of Careful, Neat, and Decent Arts of the Kentucky Shakers. And if you'll bear with me 2 seconds, I'm going to share my screen. And like any exhibition, this one certainly wouldn't exist without the collaboration and expertise of others, including our special guest tonight, Tommy Hines, who's director of the South Union Shaker Village, located in South Central Kentucky near Bowling Green. If any of you have not been there and you want to get into a magical time machine and really experience the rural life that the South Union Shakers lived, it is such a beautiful, contemplative place to go visit. And I think those are qualities that we'd all benefit from right now. Now, as Tommy Wells knows from the volume of emails that I've sent him over the past months, his expertise really helped make this exhibition happen. He knows more about the material life of the Kentucky Shakers than anyone else. And so we're lucky to have him tonight to share the story of South Union and reflect on his intimate knowledge of a place that he has led for over 30 years. So if you have questions, we'll do our best to try to answer those at the end if we have time. So send us the comments. And without further ado, I will turn things over to Tommy.
Many people might know that the Shakers had already been in New York and New England for about 30 years by the time that they sent missionaries to what they called the West. And they came here and established 4 villages in Ohio, 1 in Indiana, and 2 in Kentucky. Pleasant Hill first in 1806, and South Union a year later in 1807. So very, very early in the 19th century. And if you show that first slide, South Union began very humbly. They lived in the homes of converts and in log structures, but in 1810 built the structure that you see here in that picture. So that was the very first building that they put, the permanent building that they put up at South Union. Pleasant Hills, just about the same time, their first building was stone and ours was frame. But within the next maybe 15 to 20 years, and you can show that next slide, great things that happened at South Union as far as the architecture, the building of the community. These incredibly large, gorgeous brick structures were dominating the landscape. Our landscape is flat. We're in the part of Kentucky called the Barrens, and Pleasant Hills is the beautiful rolling hill. So they look completely different. Pleasant Hill had so many stone buildings early on, and we had principally brick structures at South Union. They used what they had. And so the next slide will show one of the large workshops at South Union. They had incredible industries. Both villages did. They had to make money to acquire the land that they had and to build these structures and to maintain that lifestyle. So the building you see here, for instance, was built really at the peak of economy in 1854. This was a building called the Sister Shop or the Wash House. And women actually led industries here in this building besides maintaining the laundry for the Center family. And as you know, both Shaker villages made fruit preserves and garden seeds and sold Shaker brooms and were in the purebred cattle industry. So economy, the commercial aspect of Shaker villages was also very important. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see our trustee's office. I know many people are familiar with the beautiful brick trustee's office at Pleasant Hill. Ours was built, again, about the same time. This was 1841. This was the seat of economy within the Shaker village. It's also where all the visitors came and could spend the night and have meals. In 1861, this is also where all the soldiers came. And so everything began to change at South Union in 1861 with the onslaught of both Northern and Southern troops who really took advantage of the Shakers' kindness and hospitality and just pretty much left them penniless after the war. And you can show what happened with the next slide. After the war, the Shakers were continually optimistic at South Union, and they built this hotel right on the railroad in 1869 in one of the many attempts to improve the economy, which was in terrible shape at that point. And in the next slide, you can also see one of the large factories that was at South Union. This was their steam flour mill built in the early 1870s. And they just continued to improve, hoping that things were going to get better, although by this time the population was beginning to decrease. This was also the time when the Ku Klux Klan began to invade South Union, and within about a 5-year period burned this building and most of the other mills and barns that were still standing at South Union. But if you'll move on to the next, we'll show the West House built in 1883. Shaker optimism sometimes is a failure, and this building was built in 1883 and torn down in 1897 by the Shakers, just because they did not see the decline that was ahead of them. And the population aged, as you can see in the next photo. This picture made in the mid 1880s, and these were some of the leaders of the community. And these same folks had been there in the 1820s and 30s as young, vibrant people, but the community was just aging and they were not getting new replacements. To show the next slide, the Shakers continued to build into the 20th century at South Union up until 1921. But the handwriting was on the wall. By 1922, only 9 people were left. And the mother colony in Mount Lebanon, New York said, it's not working. And so the village was closed in 1922. And our last slide there will show the public auction, which drew about 4,000 people. And they bought furniture and personal possessions, farm equipment, livestock, and broke the farm up into about 60 small farms. And that was the end of South Union in 1922. And at the time, it was the only Shaker village south of New York that was still standing. All the western villages had closed, Pleasant Hill in 1910, and the Ohio villages were long gone at that point too. So it was the end of the Shaker movement in Kentucky. So we want to look at some objects, I believe. And quickly at South Union and at Pleasant Hill, you'll find this too. They had some of the basic forms that people were familiar with in the 19th century, like this wonderful tripod stand that would have been used to hold a lighting source. It's very hard to discern these from the worldly examples, though, here in Kentucky, because they look so much like what everybody else was making in the surrounding region. One thing at South Union that makes us very distinctive in our material culture, if you'll show the next slide, is a abundance of ornament that you start to see in the late 1840s, 50s, and 60s. This bed, for instance, with these turned legs are very similar to what you see in the Empire period outside of Shaker villages. And again, in the next slide, you see at South Union the use of figured woods and turned legs on furniture. You just don't see this too often. In fact, in New England, you rarely ever see it. So we're not really sure why, but South Union, being the outlier, being the farthest away, got away with some of this ornamentation in furniture and also in their architecture. In the next slide, you'll see a southern form. You don't see a slab or a hunt board in any Shaker village except South Union. Southerners inhabited South Union. That's who they were drawing. And this piece of furniture that came right from our center family dining room was made to hold liquor bottles. So you just don't see this in other Shaker villages, only at South Union. And one other thing I want to mention with the next slide is how our furniture relates to our architecture. You do not see this at Pleasant Hill quite as much. So you may have had completely different people crafting the interior architectural elements as you did the furniture. But at South Union, for instance, the table that you see here and the newel post in the background are pretty much the same turning, just turned upside down. One gentleman by the name of Brother Robert Johns was our principal carpenter. He was building the buildings, and we think he was also orchestrating what was happening in the furniture making shops. One of the great things about South Union we discovered just in the past decade through the work of Susan Buck is color. And you can see that in the next slide. We've done analysis on many of our wood surfaces, and we find that the South Union Shakers were not drab and colorless at all, but to the contrary. These chrome yellow floors in the ministry shop are quite shocking to our visitors when they come in and see them on a daily basis. And in the next slide, you'll see even in a building that is as common as a dairy, they use this bright ultramarine color on the upper woodwork and the blood red on the baseboards. So color meant a lot to the Shakers. And I'll close by saying, if you show one more slide there of the Victorian period, it looks like they were making furniture up until about the 1870s and no more after that. And you will find that mirrored at Pleasant Hill too. This is the desk of our elder Harvey Eads, made in the late 1870s. And there is a desk at Pleasant Hill, different in the way it looks, but definitely influenced by the Victorian sensibilities. So there are so many parallels with the two communities, with their material culture, with their architecture, and their folk life. So when I left my Western Kentucky University in 1986 with my graduate degree in historic preservation, I came to South Union because I was interested primarily in the architecture. We only had one building that had been partially restored at the time, and it was sitting on a 2-acre tract, and I could just see the potential there and was very excited about getting to raise funds, write grants to get this restoration done. And we've been able to do that, and we own 9 of the remaining 10 buildings at South Union now, and we're sitting on 500 acres, which protects us so much more. In the 1990s, as we began to collect more and more furniture, I started to be interested in that, and that's become the real true focus of my research at South Union, is the furniture. And then I would say in the last 3 years, like a lot of the trends that you see, we've done a lot more research with the humanity of South Union and learning about the people. The progressive tenets of Shakerism make me very proud to work where I am. The fact that women and men were looked upon as equals in the 19th century, from a 19th century perspective, albeit, but also that the races were equal here at South Union. So by the 1820s, these huge dwelling houses are integrated with both white and people of color. And that is a wonderful thing that I wish had been more prevalent in the 19th century other places. But as I often say, the Shaker voice was just really too small at the time to influence society. But it's too bad that it didn't. So the learning about the people and knowing the faithfulness of the folks that lived here and the way that they stuck to those principles year after year with great optimism, but they just could not get enough new converts after the Civil War to keep the thing going. So only one Shaker village left today, and it's in the state of Maine, and our good friends, the remaining Shakers, live there, and they've been a real source of inspiration to us too.
Well, thank you, Tommy. I'm going to put you, we have a little time, so I'm going to put you on the spot here, because aside from being an expert on the Shakers, you're also an extremely talented musician as well. And so I've had experience with the Shaker legacy of their songs of faith. And I, having literally sung those tunes, what kind of response do you have to them as musicians and music writers? And I think the remarkable thing to me, having grown up a Methodist where, John and Charles Wesley wrote like all of the hymns, any of the Shakers could produce songs of faith, which I think is pretty remarkable.
It's an amazing legacy. And if you look at really all the Shaker villages have wonderful songs and hymns and all sorts of tunes that are attributed to them. So there were musicians in each village, not professionally trained, not classically trained at all, but what we would consider folk musicians who wrote beautiful melodies, Simple Gifts, for instance, written in 1848 that, we still sing today, and you hear it in television commercials. But at South Union, there are literally hundreds upon hundreds of songs in a large collection of manuscript hymn books. And they wrote in notation that was unlike what most people use. They developed their own method of notation. And there are very good scholars who are able to discern that notation and bring those things to life today. So it's a tremendous legacy of the Shakers.
Well, thank you, Tommy, for that brief look at South Union and really the Kentucky Shakers in general. Again, I hope folks will come visit you, particularly as the fall comes on, which is the most beautiful time of year around here in the state. And I have to say, I spent time as a kid on my grandparents' farm, and when I go to South Union, I have that same experience. Just the quiet, the peacefulness, the smell, the sound of birds. Great. I love Louisville, but you don't get those things here in the city. And I think that's what really makes South Union so remarkable to me. I mean, you really do get that feel of what the rural experience was like for the hundreds of believers who were living and working there.
Yeah, thank
All
you
right.
so much, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. And I invite you all to come and visit the exhibition. It'll be on view at the Speed through early January. So thanks so much, and I hope you'll come see us.
Hey everyone, my name is Richard Sullivan. I am a Louisville artist and coming to you virtually in my studio in Portland, Louisville. I'm in an old middle school building called the Dolphinger, and I'm excited to be here today. I'm going to be talking a little bit about my story and about a project I worked on with Woodford Reserve. Woodford Reserve has been the sponsor, the official sponsor or bourbon sponsor of the Kentucky Derby for many years. And for the last 19 years, they have created a special commemorative bottle for the Derby. So I want to share that bottle with you. This year I was the 2020, painted the 2020 commemorative bottle for the Kentucky Derby. And here it is, and if you haven't picked one up yet, it is probably going to be a collector's item just because this year has been so strange and the Derby being in September. And yeah, so I would recommend picking that up. I've got some bottle signings scheduled at some point, and I'd be happy to sign your bottle if you reach out to me. A little bit about my story. I come from a background of sports and art. I've always painted, from a little kid, but I've always played baseball too. So baseball was a huge focus of mine when I was growing up. That was my main kind of goal to play. But I was also drawing and painting as a kid. So, art and athletics have always been intertwined in my life. And I was lucky enough to find a college that had a sports program and an art program. So I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design, and they had a baseball team. So I was able to study illustration and study and play and continue playing baseball. And in 2008, I was drafted by the Atlanta Braves and played 6 years of professional baseball, which was, a dream come true, obviously. And after baseball was done, I started, I had a year left of school, and I went back and studied illustration again. But I really come from my artwork. I paint a lot of athletes. I paint in watercolor, like large scale watercolor paintings. And I really love watercolor because it reminds me of being back on the mound. There's an element of fear and kind of performance. You have to be in the zone, just like you did playing a sport. So that's where I come from, and that's where I came from with this bottle. So I wanted to focus on the horses. These horses are amazing athletes themselves. The jockeys are athletes, and I wanted to focus on that moment, when everything's on the line and you're just in the zone and you're just focused, and that's so my goal for this bottle was to really draw you in and make a really inspiring and amazing picture that and like you could see from the shelf and really drew you in. And so I love illustration, I love sports, and I love, painting and watercolor and fine art. So combining these different aspects into a commercial project is amazing. And most of my work is, some of it's commercial. I have 18 paintings in the Atlanta Braves Stadium, and I paint a lot of my former friends and athletes in the major leagues and in football and in a lot of sports. So my work is very accessible, but there's an underlying deeper meaning in it as well. So that's really what I wanted to relate to you today. And I would suggest if you haven't gotten a bottle and you want one, you're interested in it, I think they're still on the shelf. So go out and get your bottle. And I want to introduce Chris Morris, who's the master distiller for Woodford Reserve. I think he's going to be teaching us all about how to make a Woodford Spire. And we shared a virtual event on Wednesday, and he's just full of information, full of knowledge. So would love, enjoy his next segment. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Richard. Your Derby artwork is gorgeous, and it's been such a joy to meet you virtually as we're doing tonight here with all the wonderful goings on at the Speed. I am Chris Morris, Master Distiller at Woodford Reserve, coming to you all this evening from the Woodford Reserve Distillery. And we're going to make another bit of Derby art. It's the Woodford Reserve Spire. I created this drink about 3 years ago when we became the official presenting sponsor of the Kentucky Derby. And this is a fun drink. It's a drink for those who just don't want to have mint juleps all day. Nothing against the mint julep, but this is a new Derby tradition. And last year, we sold almost as many Woodford Spires at Churchill Downs on Derby Day as were the mint juleps. So that's a lot of fun. It's a very simple drink, and it plays off our art of using the 5 sources of flavor to make the 5 areas of flavor, whiskey flavor of course, come to life in Woodford Reserve. So we're going to use some of those flavors from our Woodford Reserve flavor wheel as Richard's using his palette of colors, we're using our palette of flavors to bring this new drink to life. So we're going to make our Spire in this Spire cup. And again, it's very simple. Woodford Reserve has a lot of citrus notes. So we're going to add fresh lemonade, 2 ounces. And then we also have a lot of berry notes, including cranberry notes. So we're going to add cranberry juice as well. And a lot of people think that's crazy. It works if you're using Woodford Reserve. Then we're going to add 2 ounces of the presenting sponsor, the official bourbon of Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby, Woodford Reserve. And we like to say it's the greatest 2 ounces in bourbon. So add 2 ounces to our Spire. And then we're going to add ice. It's a very simple drink again, as I mentioned. And we don't have to use crushed ice like you would in a mint julep. So this is something that you can very easily make at home. Plenty of ice. And then to play off those wonderful citrus notes, a nice lemon wedge. And there you have the Woodford Reserve Spire. Cheers. Hope everyone has a great night tonight.
Hello, today I'm going to talk about the first section in Andy Warhol Revelation, which is titled Ruska Dolina, Church and Community. Andy Warhol was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1928 and grew up in the neighborhood known as the Ruska Dolina, also known as the Rusin Valley. The neighborhood was home to the Carpatho-Rusin community. The Carpatho-Rusins are a community without a homeland, which is based in modern-day Slovakia. Andy Warhol's family, the Warhola family, are from a small village called Makova, based in modern-day Slovakia. The Carpatho-Rusin people are a people without a homeland, and many of them settled in the Pittsburgh region in the early 20th century. Andy Warhol's mother, Julia Warhola, not only helped cultivate Warhol's religious side, but she also encouraged his artistic side. She was the first to buy him a camera. She also gave him art supplies as he made illustrations and also colored in his coloring book and played with paper dolls. She herself was a self-taught artist. And in this section of the exhibition, the Ruska Dolina, we give you a glimpse of Julia Warhol's own body of work. The show has over a dozen illustrations that she made. She's almost like an outsider artist. She depicted her two favorite subjects, angels and cats. And so the exhibition features lots of winged angels, and some of them bear her signature, which she never signed as Julia Warhola, but actually Andy Warhol's mother. Andy Warhol would, as a child, would go to school in Pittsburgh and attend college. His father died when he was a child, and a bond was created for him to go to college. He'd be the first in his family to attend college. He graduated in 1949 from Carnegie Mellon University, then called Carnegie Tech. In 1949, he relocated to New York City and found work within a week. His first commission was with Glamour magazine as a commercial illustrator. Julia Warhola would follow several years later and move in with him in 1952. She would live with Andy for about 20 years. And not only did she cook and clean and help Andy around the house, he actually put her to work on artistic commissions. A lot of the 1950s work, those that bear penmanship, were actually based off her penmanship. The Ruska Dolina section also includes some early things from Andy Warhol's childhood, specifically from the archives in the Andy Warhol Museum. Here you'll find what the family claims to be Warhol's earliest artwork. It's a chalkware plaster of Jesus Christ meant to hold 2 candles at the base. It's the type of white chalkware plaster you might order online and and receive with a set of paints. In this case, primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. And Andy would have painted it when he was around the ages of 10 to 12 years old. And it's in the exhibition and considered quite a rare object and rarely exhibited. In the 1950s, Andy Warhol was a successful commercial illustrator. A lot of the illustrations were made for clients such as Glamour magazine, Cadillac, I. Miller Shoes, Bonwit Teller department store. And oftentimes the clients would dictate what would be represented on the illustrations themselves. This gave Andy the perfect opportunity to represent American holidays, in particular, Christmas and Easter. Andy was familiar with both holidays and he really enjoyed gift giving. The paintings behind me, as you can tell, represent Easter eggs, but they also represent the folkloric tradition of Pisanki, which was an egg decorating technique that was typical in Andy's Carpatho-Rusyn community. Thanks for watching. Come see Andy Warhol Revelation at the Speed Art Museum on view through November 29th.
Welcome back, live from the Speed Museum. It's our second virtual after hours, sponsored this month by Woodford Reserve. You got to see a great cocktail making recipe with master distiller Chris Morris, as well as some art making with Richard Sullivan and our own Brittany Thurman making woven jewelry, and a great conversation between our curator, Scott Urbis, and Tommy Hines, the executive director of the South Union Shaker Village. Tonight, we are celebrating all things speed, including Andy Warhol Revelation, which you just heard about from Jose Diaz, but especially Shaker Commonwealth, a pair of themed exhibits that celebrate the rich history of the Shaker communities in Kentucky at both Pleasant Hill and South Union. I didn't say it before, but we want to deeply thank our key partners in these exhibits, which are the Shaker Village at Pleasant Hill and South Union Shaker Village, which have lent us collectively over 50 incredible objects that tell the story of their history through design. And Scott Urbis has done a fantastic job of showing how the Shakers were design-oriented in everything they did, not just their world-famous furniture, their seed packets. They were some of the first creators of branded packaged goods, their labels, their silk fabrics, and more. And he's also dug deep to find untold stories through their archives about the enslaved African Americans who moved into the Shaker communities, often finding emancipation, but a complicated form of emancipation as well. So come see Careful, Neat, and Decent, opening today at the Speed through the rest of the year. I'm going to introduce the next hour of this month's variety show called After Hours, and I'll save the next thing for last. But after the video you're going to see of an installation that we have from artists Mariam Ghani and Aaron Allen Kelly, you're going to see my own director's cut called Shakers, Monks, and Merton, a 30-minute interview, a great conversation I had the opportunity of having this week with Brother Paul Queenan at Gethsemane Monastery. He was at Gethsemane, and I was here in Louisville because they are more monastic than ever during the age of the coronavirus. Brother Paul shares with me some really amazing insights about similarities between the Shakers and the Trappist monks at Gethsemane. Located only 50 miles apart, they came to Kentucky in exactly the same year, an incredible lineage that we compare together. He also talks about Thomas Merton. Paul Queenan was a novice who was trained under Merton when Brother Paul became a monk himself in 1958. And Thomas Merton, in the last 10 years of his life, started deeply studying and photographing the Shaker community at Pleasant Hill. And finally, Brother Paul talks about how in this moment, we are all a little more monk-like than ever, whether we're working from home or living in a monastery ourselves. That's followed by some great music, and we're going to end the night with singer-songwriter Scott Smith entertaining us all. We hope you're having a great time at home with a cocktail from Woodford Reserve or your own dinner, and you'll join us next third Friday of the month for After Hours again. But right now I'm going to introduce the second Shaker-themed exhibit opening today at the Speed. It's called When the Spirits Moved Them, They Moved. And it's a video installation made by two artists who frequently work together. Mariam Ghani is a filmmaker, Aaron Ellen Kelly's a choreographer, and they have deeply explored the sense of place in places that have a deep sense of place. If you've ever been to Pleasant Hill and Shakertown, you know that it's one of those places. And they partnered with the Louisville Ballet and another local dance troupe, Moving Collective, to do an all-day dance. And what you're going to see now is just a couple of minute video that gives you a taste of what this exhibit is like. After you've seen that and you heard from Scott and Tommy, we hope you're going to come back to the reopened Speed very soon. Come to our website, get your e-ticket, come for a safely, physically distanced visit to see Andy Warhol Revelation and our two exhibits under the Shaker Commonwealth umbrella. Thank you and enjoy the second hour of After Hours at the Speed. Hi, I'm Stephen Riley, Director of the Speed Museum, and I'm delighted to join you tonight for a Director's Cut conversation with Brother Paul Queenan from the Abbey of Gethsemane. Today is the day we open the Shaker Commonwealth, two paired exhibits that celebrate the history of the Shakers in Kentucky. One called Careful, Neat, and Decent celebrates the whole philosophy of design, including furniture, seat packets, silk fabric, and more, organized by our curator, Scott Urbis. And the second, called When the Spirits Moved Them, They Moved, presents a video installation celebrating a deep sense of place at Pleasant Hill and produced by Mariam Ghani, the filmmaker, with choreographer Aaron Ellen Kelly in partnership with the Louisville Ballet. But tonight I get a really happy opportunity to have a conversation on calling Shakers, Monks, and Merton with Brother Paul Queenan from Gethsemane. Brother Paul joined Gethsemane when he wasn't yet 18 in 1958. He is one of the few people left. He got to learn do his novice training under Thomas Merton, called Father Lewis in Gethsemane's nomenclature. And he knew Merton, Father Lewis, for the last 10 years of his life, the first 10 years of Brother Paul's period in the monastery. Brother Paul is a celebrated poet, photographer, and memoirist, most recently with the book called In Praise of the Useless Life. And I'm really excited to talk to him tonight about parallels between Shakers, monks, and even today, a year that's become more monastic for him and for many of us in the world. Welcome, Brother Paul.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So let's talk about, you and I had a pre-conversation. It's so interesting how the Shakers and monks have similar legacies or similar approaches to life, how the Rule of Benedict, which gave birth to the Cistercian movement, and the Trappists, of which you are continue to be part of, what, a 500-year, no longer, 800-year legacy. The Shakers were created much later, around in the 18th century, but many things in common, particularly for a Protestant Christian sect. What similarities do you see? And also, I should point out the really interesting fact that the Shakers and the Trappists came to central Kentucky in exactly the same year, 1806.
Oh, really?
And they settled just 50 miles from each other in this very rich agricultural land of central Kentucky.
Yes.
You all, the Trappists in between New Haven and Loretto, and the Shakers at Pleasant Hill.
That's right. Well, the first thing that strikes me is the fact that there's this Protestant community which practices celibacy. Now, this is sort of out of the ordinary because the reformers had rejected celibacy as a way of life, as being non-scriptural. And of course, it's elemental to monasticism. So you would say that perhaps that could only have been founded by a founder who was a woman, who was familiar with the suffering, great difficulty of what it is to be a housewife and raising children and so forth. That is quite extraordinary to start with. And then the other feature where it differs from our monastic practice is that there was both men and women in the community. Now there are rare occasions in the Middle Ages where there are both men and women living in separate quarters. That would be continuing today in some smaller communities. There's a Community of Jesus in Brewster, Massachusetts, the Episcopalian monastic community. They follow the Rule of St. Benedict and sing their office in Latin, of all things. But so that's one great connector. With the other is that the authority system. Now we have there was Mother Ann. She was called Mother Ann, and we have the abbot, who's the father. Mother Ann was a representative of the Holy Spirit, as I understand, or maybe of Christ. The abbot is considered by the Rule of St. Benedict to be representing Christ in the community. But for all that, there hasn't been a cult of the abbot in the sense that we sing hymns to our abbot. You'll find such things in the Shaker hymnology. So that is one connector.
What about, we talked about orphans as well, that both traditions, both the Shakers and the Trappists have had traditions of taking orphans in as well.
Well, that is found in the Rule of St. Benedict, not necessarily orphans, but oblates, they were called, where two parents may want to offer their child to the monastery. And there was a ceremony in which his hand was wrapped in the altar cloth and he was taken in and raised by the monks. Now that did not become part of the Cistercian tradition, but after the French Revolution, it became more important for monks to prove their social utility. And so having orphans and so forth was something, a practice that was accepted. So when the first attempt of establishing monastery in the United States back in the 1790s, they brought 40 orphans with them on ship across the ocean. Once they hit the harbor, many of them split. They got a free trip across the ocean. But they did continue and travel with the monks. It must have been very difficult.
Our curator tells a great story. So the Shakers, I think, took in orphans because of their goodwill, but also, as you mentioned, may have been similar for the Trappists as a recruiting tactic for a non-perpetuating kind of group. There's a story that the Shakers at South Union took in 18 orphans from all the way as far as New Orleans. And it was actually it was controversial. The New Orleanians weren't sure they wanted to let them go, whether they were going to be put into forced labor. And Henry Clay actually wrote a letter to the citizens of New Orleans attesting to the good character of the Shakers of South Union. But the orphans there, most of them did not stay. They were either tempted into backsliding or they ran off with women they had met somewhere else. But I do think it's a similar tradition. Are there orphans are there people who've come to Gethsemane now who came as orphans?
Oh, well, they came as adults.
Yes.
Might have been, orphan when they were children, but it's certainly not the practice now. It did continue. After when we were founded in 1848, there was a boys' school connected to the monastery, and there again, it was partly because of the need of the area, and partly because it was a way of, making ourselves socially acceptable to the people in the country, and that lasted up until I think 1933 or sometime in the 1930s. The school burned down, and it was never reestablished because by then there was a public education. It was quite available. I can imagine if there were, oblates, we might call them, if they were still a part of the community, it would certainly change the tone of life in a monastery where you have these kids running around. And of course, they, in the 1800s, they had to practice silence like the other monks. Charles Dickens made a visit to our monastery in Iowa, and he was horrified at the fact that there are these young people and they were not allowed to talk. He gave a very negative review of the Trappists in the United States.
Well, the Trappists had that in common with the Shakers, because Dickens also visited a Shaker community, and in his very Dickensian way, I don't have it in front of me, he kept saying it was very grim, full of grim people and grim sayings, wearing grim clothes. Which, of course, we look at it and it's not true at all. Let's also talk about architecture and design. I mean, our exhibit, Scott Irvis's exhibit at the Curator, celebrates the Shakers really approach all of life with the sense of design. And you talk about the Cistercians really having originated with that kind of spirit as well.
Well, the Cistercian architecture originated in the Romanesque period. And that was just on the cusp of the shift to a Gothic style. The characteristic of our architecture is that it's unadorned, very simple. And that corresponds to what was the ideal of the order. That is, a church in which there is no adornment, no stained glass windows, no icons except for one of Our Lady and the Child Jesus. And at the altar was a crucifix, which was to be painted, with the corpus of Jesus on the, and it was wooden. So that was very minimalistic. Even today, if you walk into a Cistercian church, you might think it's very Protestant.
Or very cheap.
Yeah, and when we did our renovation here at Gethsemane back in the 1960s, we had an eye to this Shaker architecture. Brother Clement, who was the cellarer at the time, went to visit the designer, William Schickel, and the first question he asked says, "Do you like Shaker art?" And he said, "Yes." And at that point, he was in.
He was hired.
Yeah, pretty much. So the thing about Cistercian architecture is it has a gracefulness about it, an integrity, just like the Shakers, an authenticity. I would say that was the most characteristic mark, both with the Cistercians and the Shakers, is the sense of authenticity. There's nothing that is superfluous. And we have stained glass windows with color glass in it, but no designs.
So the Shakers would be very, very indulgent, maybe, for that right. Decoration. Let's talk about work too, because another similarity is what I might call work is really grounded in the theology of the Shakers as well as in the rule of Benedict.
Well, yeah, work is one of the necessary, the three elements of our life. Ora et labora, work, prayer and work, and then added to that would be lectio, that is reading. So those are the three principal practices. The work was primarily, of course, the work of God, which takes place in the church, and where we have psalmody. But work in the fields. Now, the monks did sometimes employ helpers to work in the fields, but if there's not enough help, then the rule of Saint Benedict says the monks have to work for themselves. They're all the better monks. Now, that was practiced more or less by the Benedictines, but when the Cistercians came along in the 11th, 12th century, they made a point of using manual labor as a required element in our life. So it was an agricultural order. They developed the land. They developed swamp area. That was land reclaiming. And also they kind of had a corner on the sheep market, especially in England. So it was very successful, and that might have been the downfall of the order. We became too successful.
It became attractive to others, right? And we're together. Well, the Shakers, at their peak, and as you know, from the early 1800s until the Civil War, through the 1850s, they kept growing, and they didn't survive the Civil War in the same robust form. But at their peak, they were shipping out from Pleasant Hill on the Kentucky River hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds of preserves. They really, in some ways, invented the packaged goods business in America with their seed packets and a sense of design and branding. And I think there's similarities until recently, and your monastery still produces some food products as well for the market.
Yeah, bourbon fruitcake and bourbon fudge.
Yes.
I don't know if Shakers would go for that.
And you work in the kitchen, but you don't work in fudge or food cake production.
There were some years I worked in fudge. But
and
yeah,
tell us about the labora part of your work at Gethsemane.
Well, it's basically 4 hours of work a day, which is not an 8-hour day like many people's jobs, because our emphasis is the contemplative life. There should be time for reading, for prayer, and other things. And it's enough to sustain us. We're able to live by the work of our own hands and by the products we sell. So we're very fortunate that way. Not every monastery is able to succeed in that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, you learned to be a monk under probably the most famous monk of the 20th century, Thomas Merton, when you arrived in 1958. I know you recounted some of the disagreements you had along the way, or not disagreements, but it's got to be hard to learn to be a monk. Tell us just a little bit about what it was like to learn under Father Lewis.
Well,
Thomas Merton.
when I came to the monastery, I had forgotten that Father Lewis was the monastic name of Thomas Merton. I had already read The Seven-Story Mountain. So I was here for a month before I learned that my novice master was Thomas Merton. And that was good because at that point I had related to him as my director and novice master rather than as a famous author. And he wasn't hiding it, but he kept it in the background. He pretty much blended in with the community. It's just like one of the other monks, and he was good. I'd come into choir and, going to manual labor. Since he had books to write and classes to prepare, he would only come to the novice work about once a week, maybe twice a week. He preferred mainly to pick up an axe and lead us off to the woods to trim the forest and cut down the fallen trees for firewood, things like that. He really liked to do that, manual labor.
Again, the prayer and the labor, right?
But his talks were always very interesting, his conferences. Of course, and he was an excellent teacher. And then, of course, you would go see him once every other week. That was kind of for spiritual direction, one-on-one relationship. And, I'd ask how you doing and how are things in choir, and you might make complaints or, so it was very informal, but then he could bring some real insights to the situation. How's your relationship to your family, for instance? And we came back to that pretty often.
And I'm interested by the fact, Merton, of course, had one of the most ecumenical minds, open minds, passionate student of obviously Catholicism, but also, as we know, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sufism, every other faith tradition, right. Judaism. And then in this last decade of his life, he got interested in the Shakers. And it's interesting that Shakertown, or Pleasant Hill, was actually, you had to drive right through the town of Shakertown if you were driving from Gethsemane to Lexington. And it appears that just almost randomly that had never happened, or he'd never stopped to get out. And he became immediately enamored of the design sensibility, I would say first, and then started studying the tradition and the history of them. He ended up, for him, not writing a lot, but a couple of essays. One, an interesting kind of travelogue article for a magazine about Shakertown, and then one, an introduction to a book about Shaker furniture. Do you remember Merton's interest in the Shakers?
Well, he mentioned it at a conference one day, that he had been to Lexington and stopped by on the way back and was very impressed with the architecture. The place was run down. They hadn't renovated it yet, but he said he knew of a group that was interested in doing that. So this was early on. I wasn't surprised to see that he ended up doing some writing on it.
He, one of my favorite quotes from him, and one that many have heard before, but he wrote about Shaker furniture. The peculiar grace of a Shaker chair is due to the fact that it was made by someone capable of believing that an angel might come and sit on it.
Yes. Perfect.
It's a pretty good sentence, right? Yeah. I don't know that you can top that as a description of at least a spiritual description of a Shaker chair. But he also wrote, I think he appealed to it, I think for the same reasons you talk about the Cistercian tradition, that it was a completely miraculous achievement of forms. I think it's a very interesting description of this the physical forms relating to the theological or forms of belief, and somehow you can feel them so strongly connected.
Yes, well, that wasn't always consistent. I mean, one monastery differs from another, but on the whole, monasteries in the United States and Europe have that kind of grace. There were Baroque periods with Cistercians, especially Eastern Europe. It doesn't look a bit monastic. But when I came to Gethsemane, the place looked kind of dumpy, really. But thanks to people like Father Lewis and a few artists in the community, they realized that it really should be better and can be better. And they set about making it better. So the place is, quite lovely now.
So was that the work you described kind of in the 1960s, basically, of kind of enhancing the?
Oh, yes. That's when the big renovation took place. All four wings, including the church. The church was the last thing we did, but the other three wings, we did it pretty much ourselves. With knocking out taking the windows out, knocking the plaster off the wall to expose the bricks, tearing out the flooring and putting in new flooring. All that is work we did of ourselves, with some little professional help now and then, like pouring the terrazzo floors. So we have marble floors now, terrazzo.
Lots of work. Have you spent time at either of Kentucky's Shaker communities?
I've visited there 3 or 4 times, I think, and I'm always, charmed by it. And haven't been there recently, though. They're air conditioning the buildings. I don't think the Shakers would appreciate that.
No, but tourists do today. So
yes, well, we air condition our monastery.
Do you now?
At least the church, not the rest of it.
Yeah. You're not visiting anywhere but Gethsemane right now. So tell us a little about the state of Gethsemane in 2020.
Well, monks are supposed to practice the vow of stability. That is, you stay home. Stability is actually one of the three vows. And in that, you promise to remain in this community for the rest of your life. But that is also attached to the practice of enclosure, separation from the world. Separation from the world is another key factor connecting us with the Shakers, or them with us. So you don't go out of the monastery unless there's, a definite reason for it, doctor's appointment or maybe some business that has to be done. But we have had visitors. The Rule of St. Benedict commends hospitality. People should be welcomed as Christ when they come. So we have a retreat house, which accommodates about 53 people, and a visitor center, with a bookstore and displays. Well, none of that is open now. We don't have any retreatants. We don't have anybody coming into church while we're in prayer. As a result, monastery probably is pretty much the way it was early on in the 1800s, when we didn't have retreatants and monks really had to stay home. It was not much of a choice in any case to get out. So I think most of the guys appreciate it.
How about you?
Well, I'm enjoying it. I meet with a lot of groups that come. They want to hear a talk, or they might want to go see the Hermitage, Merton's Hermitage. And so I meet the most interesting people that way. But for the time being, I'm appreciative of what I've got.
So while monasticism is more monastic than ever for monks, the world is more monastic for the rest of us non-monks, who are to a relative degree more isolated than we are in normal life. I find a few small similarities. I've been sitting at the same place to work every day. I've watched nature very differently. life has its stresses and complications right now, but there are aspects of which I think kind of the spirit of observation is more present.
Right.
Where much more people aren't traveling. So I think the way monks really and the Shakers had a deep sense of place and were very grounded in their home place is much more intense for everyone in the world this year.
Well, everybody has to become a bit of a monk now.
Yes.
But so many people find they're just getting restless.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else to do. They'll go out in the streets and demonstrate. I wonder if there'd be so many crowds if people had jobs now. But
well, first, just advice for those of us who are feeling restless. You all have had better training than we have.
Well, precisely. You know, and Pascal says that one of the most difficult things for a man to do is to sit alone in his room. And that's what we have to learn how to do. And meditation is part of our practice.
You mentioned the protests, and I want to end by, obviously it's a year of the coronavirus and trying to keep ourselves and the people we care about in our communities healthy. It's also a year with obviously a much more heightened sense of something Merton was very aware of, is racial injustice and its history in America and how present it remains with us. Monks, like the Shakers, address these things in some ways in the way they lived, where they lived, but mostly through prayer. And so I want to end by asking a monk who's been observing the rule of St. Benedict now for over 60 years. How can you help us think about, we can go to protests, we can fight for change. How do we look for that interchange through contemplation that can help build a more equal world?
Yeah, well, before God, we're all naked. We're all very poor. We just simply have to be ourselves. And if you can accept yourself in that context, in your own poverty, you're going to be able to accept other people in their poverty. And ultimately, we're all equal. And the rule of St. Benedict does not give preference to the nobility. You rank in the community according to when you enter the monastery. So if a noble comes 1 hour after a peasant, the peasant ranks ahead of the noble. So there was that sense of equality. The other thing is everybody is given a voice. When an important question comes up, everybody should be allowed to express their opinion or express what they feel is the will of the Holy Spirit for the rest of the community.
Well, those are both themes we're all focused on. And then I think the other part that's monastic, so thank you, which is equal. We're all equal, or some come first, but it doesn't matter who the first may be last, the last may be first. What about the sense, I think so many of us, many people are doing things, but I think there's a sense of frustration among many that monks learn about, that they can't actually make change faster. Again, any final lessons for kind of how you think about contemplation and its contributions to change?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a lesson in detachment. You have to be able to live and work and hope without seeking the fruits of your praying, without being attached to results. You simply do the good for the sake of the good. You do what is right for the sake of the right, whether it's acknowledged or helps anybody else. That's not the primary thing. So that's an interior thing. You have to start with your own attitude and your own detachment. And hopefully, it can bring about some improvement in life. It certainly brings about an improvement in your life.
Well, that note is both inspiring and almost a few points there sounded like words from a Shaker hymn. So I think it's an appropriate place for us to stop and me to say a very deep thank you to you, Brother Paul Queenan.
Happy to be here.
Great insights for our exhibit. I do hope that at some point while these exhibits are up, you may come visit the renovated Speed. I know you've been to the museum before, and we'd love to welcome you again.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day.
My pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's me. Hello, everybody in the virtual world. I even wore all precautions until the final moment. It is such a joy to be back at Speed After Hours, but it is a joy to be back in Louisville, Kentucky. I've been out west for some time, and this is a gift to be here tonight and a part of a beautiful tradition that carries on even in COVID and whatever else may happen in our community. So I have some songs for you all that kind of go along with this new exhibit that's opening down here, the Quaker exhibit. The Kentucky Gallery is in full swing, and that's where I am tonight. The beautiful halls, there's a natural reverb in this room that I hope you get to enjoy some of. And again, I'm Scott T. Smith, and these are some of my tunes that have been inspired by Appalachia and by Kentucky in general. So this is called Wanted Man. I can hear the sound of that train rolling like thunder in the sky. Oh, it takes my mind on a journey to a simpler place in time. And I can hear those hooves a-cracking like lightning on the pines. I wish I could take a break. I can feel the miles in the bottom of my spine. Push further down the line. Oh, I still remember the day. Oh, everything began to change. Oh, I made myself a stranger, and her name was Fate. She said, my yoke is easy and my burden's all light, boy. Oh, we can lead a simple life. But and I'll do what I can to push further down the line. Hope I make it out this time. Oh, further out this time. Well, the wind grew cold and the frost turned white. My black rimmed hat, I could hide my love for you, my dear, but I could not hide my tracks. Oh, and my luck ran out back in Tennessee. Oh, the marshal caught up with me. You know why? 'Cause I'm hope I'll make it out this time. Oh, 'cause she's my reason why. Oh, oh my gosh. Man, I can almost imagine you comfortably applauding from the like cozy nook, you know, the L of your sectional with the popcorn and a little bit of dinner left on the corner of your mouth, but there's nobody to tell you that it's there. Oh man, this is such a wild time in the world to be performing. I just like, but I'm jealous. I'm also jealous of those of you who are in the comfort of your home. I hope that tonight on Friday night you treated yourself to support local economy. You got your favorite takeout, and that you are watching this out back before the rain comes, or you know that you're inside tucked away just with a loved one or with your puppy or whatever. This is it's a gift to be able to perform for you, even in this unorthodox setting. Mainly for me, because there's so much reverb in these halls that I could sing to myself in this guitar alone for hours, in this art, this beautiful art here at the Speed. I can't wait for people to be back in full capacity at after hours and getting to enjoy the space that is so well curated on a regular basis again. Speaking of COVID art and COVID songs, I'll play you one that I wrote during COVID for a social distanced wedding. It's a strange thing, but you know, you can't stop me. This is called Love and COVID. You can't stop me. Here we are on this particular day, far more than 6 feet away from our love, but it won't stop me. I hear good times have come and they've gone. Oh, and that time just keeps rolling on, but it won't, no, don't stop me from being with you. Oh, it's what I'm meant to do. Oh, to having to hold when the skies are not blue. Oh, being with you. Oh, it's what I'm meant to do. I can promise you more than your dreams come true. Well, I hear that the sky's gone and giving way, but it'll take a little more for me to walk away from this love that I have with you. Well, the world's gone up in flames, broke, sick, man, and going half insane. But I won't, no, I won't run away from you. 'Cause just what I'm meant to do. And I can promise you more, my love, than your dreams come true. Oh, yeah. I wrote that right around the time that John Prine had passed, and I thought to myself, maybe, just maybe, some of his love was floating around in the ethereal and helped me out with that one. It felt very, very much so like something he would spend some time with. I've got time for just a couple more. This is one that when I first started writing songs a few years ago, I started trying to write one for my parents, and it turned into a song about me, but it's still very near and dear to my heart. This is called Wolves. Smile, it gets sweeter when she lies. And all my friends say it looks just like mine. My daddy's got heavy hands that you hope he does not use. And I've been using mine just to pull my way through. Just to pull my way through, yeah. Everywhere you look, from the inside you'd see a happy home, but the shadow way just outside my door. Everywhere you look, you see cracked porcelain and feel the raindrops like tears on your skin, like tears on your skin. Oh, and I tried to live a simple life, but I just keep feeling like I'm falling behind. Oh, and I've tried, so cut me at my roots, girl. Let's see what happens when you throw me to the wall. To the wall. Oh, baby, you know I've tried to love you, but I just can't seem to do it right by you. So maybe, baby, I said, maybe, baby, I said, maybe, baby, I said, maybe, baby, oh, baby, oh, maybe, you should let me go. and throw me to the wolves, to the wolves. Oh, I tried to live a simple life, but I just keep feeling like I'm falling behind. Woo. All right, all right. Well, I think I've got time for a couple more, actually. This is called Pining After You. Growing up in the mountains, in a town well delayed. Oh, you were my Catherine Hepburn. Oh, I was your Sidney Poitier. Holding hands down Main Street, good friends by our side. No, we didn't see it coming, love. Devil walked in with a smile. But I'm pining after you. Whispers echoed through the hollers. Fear was flowing through the streets. Your daddy wouldn't let his daughter run off with a man like me. But I'm pining after you in that old-fashioned way, like my grandfather did after my Mom Jane. I'm pining after you. Oh, don't quite know what I'm living, whether it's a nightmare or a dream. Having something so precious to love, so far but so close to me. Wish I could see past the smoke of tomorrow. Wish I could be where you are and answer all your questions. Tie those loose strings in your heart. I'm pining after you in that old-fashioned way, like my grandfather did after Mama Jane. I'm pining after you. Ooh, ooh. Oh, yeah. I'm pining after you in that old-fashioned way, like my grandfather did, back before this whole world changed. I'm pining after you. Oh, after you. And I'll leave you with a short one. This is what I like to sing after my band and I have been romping around on stage and everybody's out of breath and it gets real quiet and everybody leaves. And it's just me and my guitar like to sing this song. It's called Peace, Sweet Peace. I think that if I could say anything from my heart, it's that we all are seeking peace in one way or another. There's so many feelings of anxiety right now during COVID and loss of jobs, loss of homes, loss of loved ones. There's so much anxiety for what it even means to be an American right now, and truly the future of our country in ways that we have all in some way, shape, or form been touched. And so from my heart to yours, I wish that you and your family and you and yourself find peace. And this is called Sweet Peace. Oh, peace, sweet peace, come and find me. Peace, sweet peace, come and find me. Oh, peace, sweet peace, come and find me. Come and settle in my bones. Oh, make this weary heart your home. Oh, peace, sweet peace, come and find me. Oh, fear, dark fear, take a back seat. Oh, fear, dark fear, take a back seat. Oh, come along for the ride. But the way you cannot decide. Oh, fear, dark fear, take a back seat, yeah. As long as there's air in my lungs, I will run. Oh, as long as there's air in my lungs, I will run. Oh, as long as there's air in my lungs, I will run towards the rising sun. What will, oh, come and find me. Oh, will, strong will, do not fail me now. Be my driving force. Fight to settle all my unsettled scores. Oh, will, strong will, do not fail me now. As long as there's air in my lungs, I will run. Oh, as long as there's air in my lungs, I will run. Oh, as long as there's air in my lungs, I will run towards the rising sun. Towards the rising sun. Oh, peace, sweet peace, come and find me. Oh, peace, sweet peace, come and find me. Thank you all so much for being with us here tonight at the Speed Art Museum. Thank you so much for continuing to figure out ways to be a part of our programming here and for supporting us in all that we do, our art, the artists that they support. I hope you have a beautiful, blessed evening. Enjoy your weekend. I'm Scott T. Smith signing out for the Speed Art Museum. Take care.